Viewer discretion is advised.
Allowed the voices in my head to completely take over. I heard all the past voices of all the bad things from my parents and my kids and Dan and everybody else, and I'm this horrible, awful, worthless failure of a human being. And then
November 5th, 1989, a respected attorney and his young bride are shot dead in their bed in San Diego's Marston Hills. The killer? His ex-wife, Betty Broderick. Now, before you click away thinking you've heard this one before, hold on, because what you're about to hear goes way beyond jealous ex-wife snaps. We're talking about a prominent lawyer who literally created a fining system to punish his ex-wife, deducting hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars from her support checks for things like using bad language. We're talking about anonymous mail with weight loss ads and photos captioned, "Eat your heart out, B-word." Look, Betty Broderick is a convicted double murderer. She pulled that trigger. She's responsible. No debate there. But damn, when you actually look at what Dan and Linda did during those years, well, some of it is straight up twisted. And there are details in this case that most people have never heard. Stick with me here, because this story has layers that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew. There's a lot more to the Betty Broderick case than what made the headlines, and you might see another shocking detail that changes your whole perspective. And real quick, if you're finding this interesting already, do me a solid and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who love true crime, and it takes you literally 2 seconds. Seriously, just tap it. Let's get into this. Let me set the scene. Betty and Dan Broderick got married in April 1969. She was just 21, he was 25. Classic story. Betty supported Dan through medical school at Cornell, then Harvard Law School. She worked. She raised their kids. She made it all happen while he built his career. And honestly, it worked. By the 1980s, Dan was pulling in over $1 million a year as one of San Diego's top medical malpractice attorneys. He was president of the San Diego Bar Association in 1987. They had 4 kids, a mansion in La Jolla, country club memberships, ski condos, the whole package. But here's where things started cracking. In October 1983, Betty noticed something off. Dan had hired a 21-year-old woman named Linda Kolkena as his legal assistant, even though she hadn't been to college and couldn't type. Betty's gut told her something was happening. She confronted Dan. He denied it. For 2 full years, he kept denying it. Then in February 1985, Dan moved out, told Betty he needed space to think, never mentioned divorce. But you know what he did? He later claimed February 1985 as their official separation date in court. He was already planning his exit while still telling Betty they might work things out. In fact, and this is wild, Dan went to the doctor with Betty to discuss reversing her tubal ligation so they could have a 5th child, while he was actively planning to leave the marriage. That's the kind of mind game that was happening here. All right, so the divorce gets filed in 1985. And this is where Dan's legal expertise became a weapon. This man didn't just fight in court, he created his own personal justice system for Betty. I'm not exaggerating. Dan instituted a system where he would withhold money from Betty's monthly support for every obscene word she used, every time she set foot on his property, every entry into his house, and every time she took one of the children without his permission. The amounts? $100 for obscene words, $250 each time she stepped on his property, $500 for every entry into his house, and $1,000 for every time she took the kids without permission. He documented everything, every violation, every fine. Then he deducted it straight from her checks. At one point, Betty's monthly support payment, which was supposed to be around $9,000 to $16,000, got slashed down to just over $2,000 in 1 month. Another time, she actually owed him over $1,000. Her account went negative because of these fines. In October 1986, Dan went to Europe with Linda for 2 weeks, and when they returned, He fined Betty a total of $5,000 for various instances of trespassing and offensive language that had occurred while they were gone. Think about that. He wasn't even in the country, and he still found ways to fine her thousands of dollars. Dude was monitoring her behavior from across the ocean. And here's the thing. This wasn't just about money. This was control. Dan Broderick was a powerful attorney with connections all over San Diego's legal community. Betty claimed she couldn't find lawyers willing to take her case because Dan's reputation was so strong. Multiple attorneys turned her down, some admitting they wouldn't represent her because Dan was a friend. The power imbalance was real. He knew the system inside and out, and he used it. Now look, Betty's behavior during this time wasn't helping her case. She was leaving hundreds of profane voicemails on Dan's answering machine. She drove her car into the front door of his house on Cypress Avenue while their kids were inside. She spray-painted walls, smashed stuff, even tried to set gasoline on fire at one point. Totally unnecessary, totally dramatic, and it made her look absolutely unhinged in court. That's on her. She should have gotten therapy, should have taken a step back, should have fought this in healthier ways. But you can see how the pressure cooker was building, right? Now let's talk about Linda Kolkena. Dan married her in April 1989, and that's when things got petty. Really petty. After the wedding, Betty started receiving anonymous mail that included advertisements for wrinkle-cream, facial cream, and weight loss products. Betty blamed this on Linda. Can you imagine? You're already losing your kids, your home, your entire life as you knew it, and you start getting anti-aging cream ads in the mail? But it gets worse. Betty also received an anonymous letter containing a photo of Dan and Linda with the words, "Eat your heart out, bitch." Betty swore Linda sent that too. Now, we can't prove Linda sent these things. It was anonymous. But Betty believed it came from Linda, and whether it did or not, it was psychological warfare on top of everything else. And here's another detail most people don't know. Linda refused to return Betty's original wedding china, even after she bought her own new set. Betty's daughter Kim even confirmed this to the LA Times. Little power moves like that. Keeping Betty's stuff just because she could. Plus, Linda's voice was on the answering machine that Betty kept calling to talk to her sons. Every time Betty called, she'd hear Linda's voice instead of her kids', which sent her into these explosive rants that Dan then played in court to make Betty look unstable. Look, Linda was 28 years old when she died. She was young, probably didn't fully grasp the hurricane she'd walked into. But according to multiple accounts, she participated in the provocation. And damn, some of it was cruel.
Allowed the stress of losing my house and going to jail and not having a home to put the kids, because if he throws me in jail again, I lose my house. And I was just afraid of...
Mrs. Broderick, stop right there a minute, okay? You're worried about your husband putting you in jail again. Yet, you consciously take the gun that you purchased in March, you go to the house, which you got a key to get in, okay? It's not like you knocked on the door and rang the doorbell here, okay? And said, hello, hey, can we chat? You didn't do that. You went in the back door, you knew the house well, you went to the bedroom, it's 5:30 in the morning, and you killed 2 people.
I went to Dan's house to ask him to just give me the kids and leave me the hell alone. This is too many years of this ongoing stuff. And I never got to ask him or say anything. Linda came at me, and the gun went off over and across the bed, and the physical evidence proves that. And I didn't think of anything. I wasn't thinking.
I don't want, we're not going to.
It certainly
we're not here
didn't
to
help
retry
anything.
you, okay?
Quick pause here. I'm genuinely curious what you all think about this. At what point does provocation matter in a case like this? Does it change how you view Betty's responsibility? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I actually read them and love hearing different perspectives on these cases. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We break down true crime cases like this every week with details you won't find anywhere else. Hit that subscribe button. So you've got this vicious cycle. Dan's fining Betty, controlling her money, using his legal power. Linda's allegedly sending taunting mail, her voice is on the machine. Betty's responding with vandalism, profane calls, showing up at the house, each action feeding the next. Betty broke restraining orders. She was held in contempt of court twice. She spent time in jail. Dan even had her committed to a mental health facility for 3 days after she drove her car into his door. And the kids, God, the kids were watching all of this. 4 children torn apart by their parents' war. The court eventually gave Dan full custody. Betty got limited visitation. Her monthly support, after all those fines and legal fees, I felt like scraps compared to Dan's $1 million income. And Betty? Instead of getting real help, therapy, psychiatric care, anger management, she bought a gun. A Smith & Wesson .38 revolver, 1 month before Dan and Linda's wedding. November 5th, 1989. About 7 months after Dan and Linda's wedding. Early that morning, around 5:30 a.m., Betty used her daughter Kim's key to enter Dan and Linda's mansion on Cypress Avenue. She went to their bedroom. They were asleep. Betty fired 5 shots. 2 bullets hit Linda in the head and chest, killing her instantly. 1 hit Dan in the chest, 1 hit the wall, 1 hit a nightstand. Betty later said that after she shot him, Dan said, "Okay, you got me." Then she pulled the phone cord out of the wall so he couldn't call for help. And she left. She turned herself into police later that day. I never denied doing it. Betty's first trial in 1990 ended in a hung jury. 2 jurors held out for manslaughter instead of murder. The second trial, which began in December 1991, found her guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 32 years to life, 2 consecutive terms of 15 years to life, plus 2 years for illegal use of a firearm. Her defense argued emotional abuse, provocation, that she'd been pushed to the edge. The prosecution showed the gun purchase, the premeditation, those explosive voicemails. The jury sided with the prosecution. Today, Betty Broderick is 77 years old, still incarcerated at the California Institution for Women in Chino. She's been denied parole 3 times, in 2010, 2017, and most recently with a 15-year denial. Her next hearing won't be until 2032, when she'll be 84 years old. And in interviews and in her 2015 memoir, Betty Broderick Telling on Myself, Betty shows little remorse. She still frames herself as Dan and Linda's victim, still talks about the provocation more than the murders. That lack of accountability is part of why she keeps getting denied parole. The parole board has said she's defiant, unremorseful, and doesn't understand the magnitude of what she did. So here's the bottom line. Dan and Linda's actions, the fining system, the financial chokehold, the alleged taunting, the power plays, were twisted, genuinely twisted. No one should have to endure that kind of psychological warfare during a divorce. It was cruel, it was controlling, and it absolutely contributed to Betty's breakdown. But Betty Broderick is still fully, completely responsible for those murders. She chose to buy that gun. She chose to enter that house. She chose to pull that trigger 5 times. She could have gotten therapy. She could have walked away, started over, focused on healing. She had options that didn't involve killing 2 people in their bed. The provocation matters for understanding how this happened, but it doesn't excuse what happened. 2 people died, 4 kids lost both parents, 1 dead, 1 in prison. That's the reality. And honestly, that's what makes this case so haunting. It's not just a story about a jealous ex-wife. It's a story about what happens when cruelty meets rage, when power meets desperation, when 2 people's worst impulses collide and nobody stops it before it's too late. What do you think? How much does provocation change the moral calculus of a case like this? Is Betty a victim who became a villain? Or was she always responsible for her choices no matter what Dan and Linda did? Let me know in the comments. And if this video gave you a new perspective on the Betty Broderick case, do me a favor and share it with someone who's into true crime. These stories deserve to be told with all the context, not just the headlines. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.